From Relay, this is Upgrade, episode 614. Today's show is brought to you by Delete Me, Squarespace, Factor, and Steam Clock. My name is Mike Hurley, and I'm joined by Jason Snell. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. It's Big Money Day today, Apple earnings.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that later on, but I have to start off, as we always do, with a Snell Talk question. An anonymous question asker wrote and said, assuming that the next Apple CEO transition is another 15 years from now, do you think you will still be podcasting to cover it?
Oh, interesting. And we've only been doing this podcast for, 11 years?
Yeah.
So, on one level, I want to say yes, because I want to, I want us all to be here and alive and healthy and doing podcasts. This is, like, if this had been 10, I would have said that that's my plan. 15, I always... So at least, the conversation in the U.S. always was like 65 was retirement age. And I always said I can't even imagine doing that. And that's 10 years from now. So 15 is 70 for me. That is a long, we're talking 2040, 2041.
That seems like an impossible time period.
Impossible future time. So I think what my answer to this question is this, which is, I imagine that as my career goes along here, some of the work that I do is going to fall off because it's just not going to make sense anymore.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to pay me, or I don't want to do it, or whatever, and that will just kind of, some of it will fade away, some of it will stay, and I hope that one of the last things to fade away would be Upgrade, actually.
Oh.
Upgrade in 6 colors, really. So, because I can't really imagine not. But also, I would say at some point, there comes a time where you say, I don't need to work anymore, and that would be,
Yes.
I'd love to reach that point. But I also, I imagine not working, and I can't conceive of it. Like,
I
would
think I could do nothing.
all I think of is projects I would do if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, right?
Yep.
I would literally just fill it back up with projects. Maybe they would be different. So, I mean, my answer is, I think I'm still going to say, I hope so. But I don't know. I mean, I hope so, though. I do, because I hope that I still love it, and I still want to do it, and I'm still capable of doing it. And there's enough of an audience that it's still worth it for us to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll be 53. Like, I very much expect to be working at that period. Like, I think that I will just be one of these people who just works in some capacity forever. I just can't imagine not.
That's what I've always said.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's exactly the same. I don't have a... I don't play golf or something where I've got a hobby that I just wish I could devote all my time. My hobby is essentially making stuff and working on projects. So like it's indistinguishable. I guess what I'm saying is me retired is indistinguishable from me not retired. So,
yeah. I mean, we were just having a little walk down memory lane before we started the show today, because we were chatting. It was 8 years ago this week was when we were all together for my bachelor party. Yeah. And so we were kind of just like, we were just talking about a bunch of different things. And some of the stuff that was happening around that time, like, for example, Apple's airport routers were discontinued. And I said to Jason, like, sometimes I hear about things that happened during the course of this show, and it feels like there was no way we were recording that long ago. And so if I project backwards, like 12 years from the beginning of the show or whatever, and do that again into the future, it seems completely plausible to me that we'd still be doing it.
Yeah.
So I hope that I agree with you. I hope that we're in a position where that is something that we can choose to be doing, because that would be wonderful.
Right. So bring on Upgrade, episode 1394.
Can't wait. I hope that at that point I probably will stop saying the number of the episodes.
Probably.
But, I mean, Leo still does it for Twit, so...
It'll be robots.
Yeah.
The robots know the number. Nobody else needs to know.
Bleep bloop. This is 1000111.
There's just a welcome to Upgrade. There's just a little data squirt that happens for robots to use.
That's the whole thing.
Contains the complete transcript.
It's just shortening.
And then there's the human version that happens right after that.
Yeah. Oh, if you would like to send in a Snell Talk question of your own to help us open a future episode of the show, please go to upgradefeedback.com. Thank you to all of you that do. I have some follow-up. First, we're going to start out with a question from Upgradian Mark, who writes in and says, you mentioned the Bloomberg report that Johny Srouji felt burned out and now he has been promoted to the chief role. I've heard this on multiple podcasts and in multiple reports, but it doesn't make sense to me. Surely you don't give more responsibility to someone who is burned out. Usually they retire. Why hasn't this been discussed more?
We don't know. That's part of the problem here. If Johny Srouji is truly burned out, yes, one reasonable scenario is that they're trying to keep him for reasons that are not wise. And I will bring up Johnny Ive. I think Johnny Ive was burned out, and they tried to keep him, and it I think didn't go that great. But I don't know Johny Srouji personally. Is he burned out? When he says he's burned out, does that mean he feels like? Does that mean he is actually burned out, or does it mean that he's looking for another challenge? A lot of these people who are high-powered Apple executives, they are looking for another challenge. They are working on thinking of whatever the next big hard driving thing is going to be. So I'll also throw in, could also be a negotiation tactic, right? To say, I'm feeling a little burned out. I might go do something else, as a way to get them to spring into action and give them more of an offer. So I guess what I would say is, we don't know from the outside. And that's one of the reasons it's hard to discuss it. If Johny Srouji, because that's really between him and his family and his therapist and whatever, if Johny Srouji is truly what we think of as burned out, he should take a sabbatical is what he should do, right? But is he? Or is that just a statement that was made that actually means something different? Because, and the reason that I don't think I discussed it is, I don't know, but I'm inclined to believe that this was a negotiation, and that was what was going on, and that if Johny Srouji truly was what we consider burned out, given everything he's got, he could retire and go away and play golf or do whatever for a year, and then maybe come back and do something different somewhere else. And that's not what he chose to do. And we can't know whether he's choosing poorly because it's too great an opportunity for him not to say yes. I've been there personally, where it's this is probably not something I should agree to, but I'm going to agree to it because it seems like a good idea. And you can regret those decisions. But first off, it's impossible to know from the outside. And second, sure. I just kind of tend to believe that this is more about negotiating in the wake of Tim Cook's succession plan and not about a legitimate burnout situation. But I don't know.
I mean, I would say that in my career, I have been burned out on particular types of work. And maybe he was not interested in running the
another processor cycle.
Yeah, maybe it's I have done this too many times. And what he would like to do is take a much broader, bigger picture role where he's more interfacing with people about how they're working in teams rather than all right, so how many cores is this one going to have? Maybe he's done with that kind of ground level work.
which I would say is not quite the same as what we think of it, and I think what Mark is referring to as burnout. That's more I'm looking for a new challenge. Mm-hmm. This is too samey for me. I want to do something different. I'd like more responsibility here. And again, if this is part of the negotiation process, a great way for me to get new challenges is to leave and start my own company or go work somewhere else and then build something new. And that will be a new challenge. And Apple's response is, wait, what if we give you a new challenge here? Yeah.
So moving on, Apple has released their trailer for season 4 of Ted Lasso. It debuts on August 5th. The trailer feels like Ted Lasso, looks like Ted Lasso. I am nervous about this show, but I am hopeful that they're going to do it right. But we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that this is not the obligatory Ted Lasso, but more that they came up with a good story for this new next chapter in Ted Lasso's life, and I'm encouraged by the idea that they sort of told the story they wanted to tell, which was about him trying to figure out who he was, and he's running away from his failing and failed marriage, and figuring out his relationship with his kids, but figuring out who he is, and then ultimately going full circle and going back to America. This is going to be a different story, right? Because presumably he's not running away from his life. So what does this story mean? I'm encouraged. Like, I think that could be perfectly valid, but it also is fair to say that this is kind of Ted Lasso too, right? Like, it is, what's the next story? It's what they said about Shrinking, right? They just finished the 3rd season of Shrinking, and they said that the whole point of that was a 3-season arc about Jimmy going through grief and getting to the end, and then being able to look forward again. And they felt strongly that they wanted to tell that story. They didn't want to suspend those characters permanently in the middle, and that if they wanted to do more, which they do, find a new story to tell with those characters about where they go next in their lives. Because so many TV shows, you end up with a premise, and then you have to suspend the premise, and just it hovers there forever, and nobody can ever progress because we don't want to change the show. And I think some of these modern prestige comedy shows, they don't want to do that. And I think that's great, because that's not how life works. Life is always moving forward.
So this past weekend, F1 returned for the 4th race of the season. There had been a break of over a month because a couple of races got cancelled because they were in the Middle East. And with this 4th, it's now stateside, so it was the Miami Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. With it, Apple has debuted their first originally produced content for the sport. So there's 2 different initiatives. One is called Circuits in Focus. This is available on Apple TV. Weirdly to me, not outside of America. Like, this is original content, like, that Apple's producing, but they're not making it available
under the
outside.
F1 license, I guess.
So basically what it is, it's a track preview series. The 2 hosts are former world champion Nico Rosberg and content creator, and I'll read from Apple's press release, record-breaking car builder and driver Amelia Hartford. They're using, this is fascinating to me, they're using the F1 25 video game made by EA to produce the show and show the tracks, which is a great way to do it because the tracks have all the courses in them. I wanted to see what this show looked like, but couldn't. So I don't know what it looks like, but interesting. And then there's also something called the POV, which is a social series featuring former Red Bull Racing senior technician Callum Nicholas. Callum became popular on Drive to Survive. He was featured quite heavily in Drive to Survive and built a social following, and now has left Red Bull and is doing this. Is a content creator. And content creator and engineer Christina Roki, as they react to key moments from the weekend. So it's a social series, like, look at this, overtake, look at that kind of thing. I find this fascinating because why at this point in the season are we debuting our first original content? Like, why was this not at race 1? I think it again says to me a thing that I think we were feeling is that this came together maybe a little later than everybody would have wanted. The deal in general, and they did not have enough time to get their ducks in a row. Yeah, I think that's true. Which is why they went with F1 TV and just kind of taking all that, as I would just do. And this is a multi-year relationship, and they're progressing it, and they figure this is the first U.S. race, so it's actually one of the better ones in terms of time slot. Although hilariously it got moved. They moved it up because of the rain, because who could figure there'd be rain in Florida? Yeah. I have a note here, Mike, which is I watched, not all, but I watched some of their... So I turned on the TV, I was like, oh, the F1 race is today, and it was already over. Okay. But very, very soon, shockingly soon, a few hours after the race was over, they posted their Race in 30 cut down, where you can watch the entire race in 30 minutes. I thought that was great. I thought that was really well done, and I love that idea that you're not necessarily invested enough to watch the race live or watch a playback of it in real time, but you can watch a 30-minute cut down, and I'm a big fan of that for sporting events you miss. I watch baseball games like that sometimes that are these condensed games that are only 14 minutes long, but they show you everything that happened in the game. And the Giants used to do a thing here in the Bay Area. I don't think they do it anymore. That was I think Giants in 30, and they would take that day's game and cut it to 30-minute time slot. And I like that idea a lot. So I watched some of that, which was fun.
There was very dramatic stuff at the beginning and end of the race.
It was a good race to watch a highlights package of. I will say that. The beginning and the end were bananas. Like there was all kinds of weird stuff happening. So it was worth watching.
Spinning cars and
lots of spinning.
So
breaking.
That's what you do in Miami, I guess.
Yeah,
I think they're doing pretty good. I also noticed that friend of the show, Carolina Milanese, went to an IMAX screening of F1 in Atlanta, which is fun because they did it in theaters, and then all the theaters are like, "Oh, it's starting 3 hours early." Yes. They just send those out to people too.
They're doing this with a few races. I think it's the US races, although I actually think they did it for the season opener. Anyway, but it's one of the IMAX races, so they're showing it in IMAX. I had a friend who went to one of these, and he said it was fun, but didn't really feel like it made any sense for why it was in IMAX. Like there was nothing specific for the IMAX showing. It was just the Apple TV feed. So it's like, it could have been in any theater. Like it didn't really, there was like nothing IMAX-y about it.
Right.
And they also said at the screening that they went to,
just, big screen, good sound. That's nice.
Yeah, sure. But like they said that there were people from Apple at this screening, and they were doing like a focus group with a selection of people and like giving out pieces of paper afterwards. Like, what did you think of this? I guess is the idea. So they're trying to collect information about what people think. Sticking on the motor racing vibe, Porsche have celebrated Apple at 50 with an homage to their 1980 Le Mans livery, which is a very it is a iconic the Le Mans livery with says Apple Computer in the classic
in Modern Tectura. Oh my God! And it has the Apple Rainbow, but it also has on the top. It's got the rainbow Apple logo.
Yep,
it's so good. Oh
yes,
my God!
They crushed it with this one.
Oh my God!
Apple Music is a sponsor of the Porsche team. And so I think this was like a fun extension of that, right? Of them working together. But staying with this, Eddie Q spoke about John Ternus and his love of racing as part of the build-up to the F1 weekend. This is a quote from friend of the show, Eddie Q. John actually drives a Porsche and does amateur racing. He would actually be here this weekend, here being Miami, but he's at Laguna Seca. So rest assured, if anything, he's going to be at more races even than Tim. He's a huge, huge fan of F1, and he's known about this. He's a huge supporter, so you'll continue to see full support from him. I find this whole quote hilarious. I think we maybe saw evidence of Tim Cook being at one race, and he waved the flag. Maybe at more, but sure, okay. Well, I look forward to seeing John Turner some more F1 races in the future.
Yeah, I love that he's he apparently drives a Porsche and I think you made the prediction that we'll see Ternus. I think you said let's see Ternus in a car sometime in
this car. I was thinking he was going to be in this one,
and maybe during practice or something he did do that at Laguna Seca.
I'm convinced he was in the car. I just have yet to see any evidence of it.
Yeah, but there's putting a kid in a car and being I'm in the car, and that's not quite the same. But yeah, so it's fun, and the car looks really cool. Can I do Well, you had a note about John Ternus before. I'm going to do a little quick follow-out, but please tell me another fact about America's favorite Apple CEO.
Well, this was in me thinking about
John Ternus.
Can I find any evidence of John Ternus having been in this race car? I realized John Ternus has no public social media of any kind.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is going to change, if he will get public social media and where that will be, or if he's just saying, I ain't doing that.
Yeah, maybe.
It's going to be interesting to see. But I think he'll have to have something.
I think, even saying he will, I think Apple's marketing people will put together a John Ternus channel of content somewhere that will be fed by Apple's PR marketing people, but I think that's what it'll be. I think it'll be real hands-off. That's my guess. His people will do it, and like any kind of handled celebrity. I mean, Tim Cook is like that too, I would argue. So I think they will do that for Ternus.
Someone told me once that Cook posts his own tweets.
Yeah, it's possible, but I'd be surprised if that happens for Ternus. And it's actually kind of a shame that they don't create like an Apple CEO account so they can just roll to the next. Like the Tim Cook account just becomes the John Ternus account on September 1st, right? Like,
or John Ternus just becomes at Tim Cook.
At Tim Cook.
Maybe,
At John Apple, yeah. Mm-hmm. My follow-out is to... I enjoy the podcast you do here on the Relay Network with Federico and Steven called Connected, the Connected Program, formerly the Prompt, now called the Connected Program.
Yep.
You did episode 601 last week. Mm-hmm. Episode 600 is funny, and it's got a clip show, and then Steven makes some videos, but 601 I feel like is a perfect distillation of the silliness of Connected, because you all chose to do a tier list of things Tim Cook said, which
Tim
is
Cook
great.
Quote tier list. That was completely Federico's idea. It was brilliant.
So I recommend it because it's wild. And it's a great way to kind of like revisit things that, like we were talking about earlier, you're like, I can't believe that happened back then. And that things that our brains have just suppressed or have filed away in the deep prehistory. And it turns out that, no, there's a whole episode of our own podcast about it. I have two notes that I want to mention here, though.
Yep.
And I've shared these with you earlier today because I was listening to the podcast this morning and I was thinking about it. One is you have a tier list, and so many of the quotes in your Tim Cook quote list are from the D Conference, which used to be Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher did it, and then it became like Wall Street Journal Conference, and then it turned into the Code Conference. But like the D Conference had a lot of great quotes from Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and other people and Tim Cook. And you had a tier list, and I thought it was a real missed opportunity not to just declare that the D tier was things he said at D.
You're right. I wish we would have. Unfortunately, it would have mean about 95% of the quotes.
I know, but still, by definition, you're like, well, I mean, this is a good quote, but it goes in the D tier because it's all the D Conference.
We could have had a tier list within the D tier.
Yeah, the DD, double D. Here is my other piece of feedback for you, which is, yes, it is literally, I can't believe you didn't mention. I thought I would share with you my favorite underrated Tim Cook all-time quote, if you'll allow me. With other developers, the kinds of products you see, like Pokemon. And so that's the reason you see so many iPhones out there in the wild chasing Pokemans. A thing Tim Cook said, chasing Pokemans. Whenever I hear great Tim Cook quotes, I think Pokemans.
I found an article from The Guardian. Apple CEO Tim Cook outs himself as a huge, quote, Pokemans fan. That's great. So this was Pokemon Go, right? This is Pokemon Go time? Yeah.
Yeah, 2016. Huge. I love the Pokemans. It's great.
I wish we would have had this one, because that would have been an S tier.
I think that's an S tier Tim Cook quote, that I love the Pokemans.
It's like, why did he even? Why did anyone even? I mean,
well, look. I'm sure we said this at the time, okay? But just to replay this now. If he's going to talk about Pokemon Go on an analyst call, write the script for him.
Yes.
And make it clear that it's Pokemon and Pokemon.
Yes, it's like Lego.
Or Pokemons, if you would like. But don't say well, if you would, just, like, I would accept that. But do not say Pokemans.
Yeah.
Please do not do it. But they didn't. They just let him go wild. Let's let him freestyle this one. Anyway, I think that's an S tier Tim Cookism. I love the Pokemans. I love them.
Pokemans.
I'm bullish on Pokemans.
There could be a Pokemon called Bullish, and everyone will be happy about that.
What does it evolve into? Bearish.
Oh, we're on it.
Oh, man. We're killing it today. Good for us. Pat ourselves on the back.
Yep. This episode is brought to you by Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are all too common and make everybody vulnerable. Delete Me will send you regular personalized privacy reports showing what information they have found about you online, where they found it, and what has been removed. This is a super simple service where you just go and you say, hey, look, there's a bunch of information about me, or it could be your family's personal information. This is the stuff that I want removed from the internet, and they will go out and take care of it for you, because Delete Me knows that your privacy is worth protecting. Sign up and provide them exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts will take it from there. I get regular reports from Delete Me where it shows, I actually just got one this weekend, where it shows me, hey, look, we found your information at these data brokers and we're getting it removed. It's going to take this amount of time. We're tracking it. Here's one that we're monitoring. And what I love as well is it's not just a one-time thing. They're going out and they're checking this stuff over time, and they're making sure that my private information remains just that. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now, with a special offer for listeners of this show, you can get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 and use the promo code upgrade20 at checkout. You will get that 20% off, and this is the only way to do it, by going to joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 and use the code upgrade20 at checkout. One last time, that is joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 with the code upgrade20. Thanks to Delete Me for their support of this show and Relay.
Money, 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 who has all the money? Money, 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 who has all the money? Money, 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 who has all the money? It's Apple.
We're back once again, everybody. It's Apple's Q2 earnings report. I have some headlines for you. We have some areas to dig into.
Yes.
I'm always happy when there's actual interesting stuff to talk about after one of these things, and this is unbelievably one of those quarters. I think there's a lot to talk about. I mean, you've written many words about it, Jason, so I would like to assume that you have some things that you want to say.
I did write a lot of words about it, but I will say it's a challenge in the sense that
interesting.
The numbers, the things said in the call are interesting. Things said, the things on the charts I found profoundly uninteresting.
I found one spot that I liked, which I'll get to in a second.
Because just to be clear, all of the numbers went up everywhere.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the whole. Like everything was up globally. Every category, every region, everything just was up. So that part is boring, but yes, there are interesting things. I did spend Thursday night right until late writing 2,000 words about it. So yes, fair.
So this is Apple's second quarter. Revenue is $111.2 billion for the quarter. That is up 17% year over year and is the record Q2 quarter.
Right.
We always talk about money going up, but they're not always record quarters.
They're very, very frequently these days.
Very frequently, but not
they
always.
are. I think the most notable thing here is that this is three straight quarters over $100 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
And the boring, I referred to this in my article as these are the boring quarters, right? There's the holiday quarter, which is like super exciting and they always make a huge amount of money. And then there are the more boring quarters where they make less money. The boring quarters now, 2 boring quarters in a row have been over $100 billion. And I'll just say, if you look back at my chart, you'll see that in 2021, the boring quarters were 80 and now they're over 100. That is wild, right? Like that is kind of the growth that is harder to notice, which is that Apple their baseline of what they make in a quarter just keeps ratcheting up every single year.
Well, now it's like we just assume 100 billion is the floor, the quarter floor.
I mean, their previous at 111.2 billion, their previous Q2 record quarter was 97, I want to say, and it's been a while. Last year was 95. So 111, it's not even close. It's pretty wild. Pretty wild.
Because it's we're looking at the chart, right? So with the overall revenue, with the year-over-year growth, it was from 2024, it was a single-digit percentages most of the way through into 25. A little bit of growth here or there, and then these last 2 quarters, 16% and 17%.
Yeah,
it's not just that they're growing; they've hit a little jump again, and we'll talk about where that's come from in a minute. Profit is $29.6 billion, up 19% year over year. Also incredible to me that they've made more profit, right, than they have revenue. There's nearly 20% up, so it's 90% over 70%. The iPhone is $57 billion. That is up 22% year over year. So there's clearly some strong growth in the iPhone line, and I want to jump to a chart we don't always talk about, which is the Greater China revenue, which Apple pulls out specifically in their earnings report. They don't do this for any other region, but they do for China. That is up 28% year over year. And the thing that really stuck out to me from looking at your charts is if you take the iPhone chart and like the revenue change chart and the Greater China revenue change chart, they essentially overlap.
They're pretty similar.
What you can see is this growth, this big growth, and then this big growth for the iPhone, again, like up like 22% year over year. It seems to be that China has driven the majority of that change because China has also finally started rising again. Did they give a lot of context as to why the China has been down essentially for years?
Yeah, it's been flat to down, kind of all over the place. I don't know. I mean, they didn't give a lot of color on that. It was very much like Tim saying, we're the best-selling phone. I think they made broad statements about the iPhone 17 line. I think it is fair to say they said this is the best iPhone launch they've ever had. Now, they defined it in a very specific way that you can find in the charts, which is if you look at Q1 and Q2 performance are put together, which is like the first 2 quarters of on sale for the iPhone. This is the best iPhone launch ever. But it is clear to me that the iPhone 17 has been very successful, which is funny, right? Because going into it, there was a lot of talk about how it was going to be kind of, Apple was making the same phone over and over again for a while, but like they changed the enclosure, they changed the colors on the Pro models, they added some new models, and they brought a bunch of Pro features down into the slightly more affordable models. And I think generally the iPhone 17, people in our world have suggested that it's very good, that it's a successful product, and the market has suggested that it's a hit product with people like it and are buying it in great numbers. So I think that is strength of the iPhone 17. I think phones that offer something new do better in China, and so I think that might be part of it too. I think it's also really funny just to see the polarization. I don't know if that's right. Almost like a multiplier in China, like. When China's going kind of bad, or not bad, but not great, the results in China are sort of down a little bit from what they are in the rest of the world. And so, like, Q4, China was down 4%, but the iPhone was up 6%. And Q3, China was up 4%, but the rest of or overall, the iPhone was 13%. So it's like there was a period where the China number was just a little bit less. But it kind of tracked, but it was a little bit less. Now it's greater, right? It's 38 and 28, and the iPhone growth numbers are 23 and 22. So it's just interesting to see that China and overall revenue kind of track, but there are like the places where China's ahead and the places where China's behind. And with the iPhone 17 line, China's ahead. They're dragging the numbers upward.
Yep.
My best guess is just really that it's the strength of the iPhone 17 line, that this was a combination of features that resonated and sold more iPhones.
It's going to be really interesting to see what the next 2 years look like, knowing what we believe to know about Apple's roadmap, that we have kind of some big iPhones on the horizon.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see, do we end up with multiple years of solid growth in China and the iPhone because the lineup continues to strengthen? It's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I think it is pretty clear that what we felt about the 17, we were both talking about it on this show, of like, this feels like the strongest lineup of phones Apple has ever produced. Like there were wins across the board. I mean, the iPhone Air, I think, did not go where we thought it would go, right? Like, but it's showing it all off, like, oh, there is every single one of these phones is good in its own way, and I think that has bared out in the fact that they've made an ungodly amount of money from the iPhone in the past year. The Mac is at $8.4 billion, up 6% year over year. The iPad is at $6.9 billion, which is up 8%. Services is at $31 billion now, up another 16%.
Yeah.
I feel like we say the same things about services every time, but
we do.
It just keeps growing. It just keeps going up.
It has been growing double digits, sort of low to mid-teens, every quarter since Q4 of 2023, right? So it's been a few years of double digit. There was an explosive growth period, and then it kind of tailed off. But since late 23, it's been 16, 11, 14, 14, 12, 14, 12, 13, 15, 14, 16. So like they've just kind of dialed it in that this is, and this is why, look, I think sometimes we can overstate services. I think Apple talks about services a lot because Apple wants Wall Street to hear it. Services narrative serves in part to insulate Apple from the vagaries of iPhone sales and other product sales and cycles, because Wall Street's always worried about, is the next iPhone going to do good or going to do bad or all of that, right? Services allows them to point at a thing and say, look, constant growth, don't you love it? And they do love it, and they know it, and that's fine. So services is now 28% in this quarter of their revenue. It is important to note, I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again, when we talk about services, it's important to note services is best thought of as add-on services for Apple products you already use. Yep. And since half of Apple's revenue is from the iPhone, you could really strongly argue that, because sometimes people, this is that freak out thing, and my freak out chart hasn't happened. It hasn't hit yet, but we're getting close, where there's going to be a quarter where Apple makes more profit on services than products.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have that existential moment of like, oh no, Apple's just a services company. But the fact is the services all emerge from the products. Like you don't buy Apple services unless you have an iPhone.
And
just
it's the ongoing payments that we continue to make to
exactly
Apple for everything. Like it's
exactly.
Apple Pay, it's App Store, it's everything. And like, one of my favorite charts that you do is the quarterly revenue by category. And in this past quarter, it's 51% iPhone, 28% services. I reckon within the next 5 years, there will be the quarter will happen where the services quarter will be bigger than the iPhone.
Yeah, this year and next, yeah.
And
but again,
it's going to be incredible.
If you want to think about it that way, I would encourage you, and I would say the services is probably even indexed further toward iPhone, but so we said 57 billion in iPhone revenue. It would be very easy for us to say it's 57 billion in iPhone revenue, but really it's more like 80 billion because a whole bunch of that services is tied into people who are primarily iPhone customers, because most of Apple's customers are iPhone customers, right? Just the law of numbers. There aren't as many Mac users as there are iPhone users, right? So there are so many people who are using Apple services who just have an iPhone. And so that's all iPhone money. It's not services. Services, if Apple wasn't selling products anymore and was just a services company, I assure you their services business would not be good.
Yeah.
That's all.
It would shrink. I mean, if you think about it though, right? Like even people that do have all of the products, the iPhone is just where the services money comes from no matter what you're doing, because of what the services money is, right? Like on the Mac, you may not be encountering a lot of the daily services as often. You don't only get your software from the App Store. You're not using your app for Apple Pay, right? Like you're not, you may be using Chrome, so you're not even, benefiting Apple in the search deals. Like no matter kind of where the user is based, the iPhone is the core of the services. So yeah, if you thought of it as we have iPhone hardware and iPhone software, and we've just put services in the software, then it just makes Apple, 80% of their revenue for this quarter was iPhone in that scenario. If you
could make that argument. It's not not 100%, but and I'm sure that I'm sure they've done the numbers inside that there's some amount of capture of the more Apple devices you have, the more services revenue you probably are likely, because then you're more in the ecosystem. I get it. I get why that's probably true, but I just want to restate the idea that services is very impressive and it's important, especially I think for Wall Street, and it allows Apple to set a narrative a certain way. But I think we can talk about it a little too much, because in the end, Apple services revenue is largely generated from the success of Apple's hardware.
Yep. I'm actually going to bring in an Ask Upgrade question now because it's very related to what we're talking about. Thank you. This comes from Tom, who says, I was reading Jason's Six Colors post about the earnings, and I have a question about the categories Apple report. Do they make sense? Why do they separate the hardware products into distinct categories, and then there is just the bucket of services, which maybe makes more sense to report separately than the hardware? Is this for historical reasons, or is there still a good reason for doing it this way?
Little bit of both. First off, there are some filing, there are actual regulations in, because Apple is a public company, about how they disclose. What they don't have to do is disclose like every detail of every iPhone model, right? But there is, above a certain point, you need to break out your categories. You can't just say hardware. So part of this is historic. Like Apple used to have a Mac category and then like other. And then they added the iPod, which the iPod then, faded away and vanished. They have the iPad category. Wearables, home and accessories used to be other. They renamed it.
Yep.
They added services in at some point. I don't even remember when. So, but there's a point at which it's a material to your business, and I don't know the actual regulations. And so Apple is comfortable with numbers that characterize the trajectory of their hardware business in certain ways. There are things that they used to disclose that they don't anymore. They used to disclose unit sales, and now they only now they only disclose revenue numbers. So we have to guess about how is the business growing, or is it only becoming more revenue generation focused, right? Like if the revenue goes up, did they sell more phones, or did they just raise the price of the phones? And we can't tell, or the Macs or the iPads. So there's that. And services, I think they don't need to break it out further, and so they're not gonna. No. I would also say, you say maybe makes more sense to report separately, but what we know about services is that Apple's deal with Google is in there.
Yeah, not to Apple it doesn't. They don't want people to know how much money they make from Apple TV compared to Google.
Exactly. The Google search deal, which is pure profit, is in there, and they get to it allows them, talk about the service narrative earlier, it allows the service narrative to seem bigger. And it's not a lie, but it allows it to seem bigger than maybe it allows people to think of it as, wow, that Apple TV is doing great, when actually, a huge amount of it is the Google search deal. And so they don't want to break that out. And if they don't legally have to, they will not. So I would say Apple is, as a public company, legally obligated to disclose a certain amount about their business. And they will obviously abide by that law. And then I would say beyond that, their disclosures are a combination of historic, but also choices they make about how they want to explain the narrative of their business to investors. Because I'll tell you, if Apple was privately held, we would know nothing about their business. Yeah. They don't tell us because they want to. They tell us because they have to. And they've chosen philosophically, I think smartly, to view that as an opportunity to market. I mean, it's investor relations is what this whole part of the company is called. They are essentially marketing their business to investors because it's their fiduciary duty to do so. It's their regulatory duty to do so. But also, it allows them to set a narrative that makes, it keeps them happy. The Apple shareholders are so happy. And this is what they want. They want them to be happy. They want them to just be like, oh man, Apple, I love it. They give me dividends. They're buying back stock and raising the price of my stock. It's great. So that's what's going on here. It's a combination of what they're legally required to disclose and then the story they want to tell. But that's it.
The last category is wearables, home, and accessories, $7.9 billion, up 5% year over year. This is the first growth quarter since Q3 2023 for other.
Yeah, for wearables, home, and accessories. Yeah, they said something about the Apple Watch. I imagine AirPods are a driver here too.
Yep.
But this is, I'll say it again, John Ternus is rumored to be behind a lot of their push into a new set of smart home products, which, we've been saying it for a decade, that this is a place that Apple could actually do something. And that would certainly help this category if it added more products in It is not. It is by far not Apple's most important product category, but it had a growth phase for a while, and then it stopped, and now it doesn't do that. But it did grow. It had. I'm looking at the numbers here. It had 2.5 years of down of year-over-year losses until this quarter. So at least they stabilized it a little bit.
A $500 HomePod with a screen on it would help.
Yeah, well, and I would say, like, you can go through the whole upgrade archive and hear us talk about this at depth, but I would say the HomePod with the screen will not move it much, just like the HomePod didn't, just like the HomePod Mini didn't, just like the Apple TV doesn't. But if they had a coherent strategy, and honestly, the one that I keep coming back to is if Apple could put out a privacy-focused set of doorbell cams and security cams that didn't share your video with the cops or the FBI or whoever, but was like just for you, and Apple could use its security promise to say, we're going to keep your data secure and we're going to keep your home secure, and it interoperates with everything else. But like, I think that's a really interesting sales pitch at a point where there are a lot of people, especially who are just so dissatisfied with like Ring cameras and where that data goes, and that the feeling that it's not private. I think that, but I think this is the larger point here, which is if Apple's going to do this, they can't just toss another product in the mix. They need to actually have a strategy, and they need to have multiple products.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. We will see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I necessarily believe that they will do it and that they will succeed in it, but I sure like them to try.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform that is designed to help you stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just getting started or scaling a business, Squarespace will give you everything that you need to claim your domain, showcase your offerings of a professional website, grow your brand, and get paid all in one place. With Squarespace, you can get discovered fast with a suite of integrated SEO tools, because why build a beautiful website for nobody to ever see it? That is why every Squarespace website is optimized to be indexed with meta descriptions, an auto-generated sitemap, and more, so people will find your site through search engine results. It's so easy to build a Squarespace website, make it look exactly the way that you want, and you're going to be so proud of it because of how beautiful it's going to look, so you want people to be able to find it, especially if it's for a business, because you can also offer your services and get paid with Squarespace. From consultations to events and experiences, you can showcase your offerings with a customizable website that is designed to attract clients and grow your business. You can have built-in appointment scheduling, email marketing tools, and more, plus keep everything cohesive with unbranded invoices and get paid easily with online payments. I've been playing around with some of the email marketing tools recently, and I've been so impressed by, again, just how easy it is and understandable it is, and fully featured as well. Don't just take my word for it. Go and try it out for yourself. Go to squarespace.com/upgrade and you can sign up for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your website to the world, use the offer code UPGRADE. You'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That is squarespace.com/upgrade with the offer code UPGRADE to get your 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for this show. Our thanks to Squarespace for the continued support of Upgrade and all of Relay. So I want to do some analysis stuff, and there was some news that came out kind of during and after the results. So this was Tim Cook's 89th call. He's going to do one more.
He called it out. He said, "This is my 89th," and I thought, "Oh my God, I've been doing this so long too."
Yeah,
not as long as Tim, but pretty. I mean, I remember when Tim would do the calls when Steve was CEO, and Steve would occasionally appear, and we got excited when Steve appeared, but usually it was just Tim, and I think Fred Anderson, the CFO. I think he's going to be on the 90th. I think he's on the next one, and then he's not the CEO after that. So I think we got one last dance with Tim Cook to talk about the numbers in like late August.
That'd be nice.
Or late July. So he'll still have a month to go.
Is he?
Till September 1st.
He's still there.
Yeah.
So you would assume that he would do one more. So because it kind of felt like when I was looking at your report, it kind of felt like, all right, goodbye everybody, but it's not that way. But like obviously he kind of they treated it a little bit of, because you can't not, of like, oh okay, we're acknowledging the fact that we all know he's leaving now. And so
yeah, they had to do that, right? And I think you could even argue that it's kind of a victory lap about how they managed it, where they got the information out there, and let's just not, make no bones about it. The FT report in late November or whatever was a leak, and that's good because Wall Street likes growth. They also like not to be surprised by anything, and that's how they handled it. So it was a little bit of a, yes, as you know, we're doing a transition. We're very responsible. John Ternus is here. John Ternus read a little statement, and then he threw it back to Tim, and then Tim continued on. And it's very much like, let's introduce you to John on the call. You'll be hearing him in the future, but I'm still doing it now because we're adults here, and this is what we said we would do. And September 1st, he'll take over. That, it's all part of the plan.
It's like, get used to this guy. You're going to be hearing a lot from him.
Yep.
Here's your guy. And Ternus had a bunch to say as well. He was there. He appeared.
Yes.
And he says, I got to read a couple of quotes.
Let's just say he was introduced by Tim Cook, who said lots of very kind things about John Ternus. And then John Ternus immediately said, Tim Cook is one of the greatest business leaders of all time.
I mean,
he's right. He's sitting right there, John. You got the job already, okay?
Yes, you don't have to suck up. No, you got to. He is though, right? He is.
That's a thing you say on an analyst call. Is what it is.
Absolutely, yeah. She's saying it to a captive audience. It also said one of the hallmarks of Tim's tenure has been a deep thoughtfulness, deliberateness, and discipline when it comes to financial decision making of the company. And I want you to know that is something Kevin and I intend to continue when I transition into the role in September.
Yes, we will still be doing good work. We're not going to blow it all on a race car or something.
I mean, and it's obviously, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, is what he's going to say. I think maybe people have been reading into aha, you see, he's the same. It's
no, it's literally message to Wall Street. Don't worry about it. Apple's going to be fine, which is the whole message of the whole CEO transition. That's the whole point of the CEO transition is to let the business community understand that it's all being done carefully and responsibly and everything's going to be okay.
Yep.
Which, again, remember how it happened the last time, where it was sudden and shocking and Tim Cook was thrown into it and they had to scramble. And the whole purpose here is to not do it that way.
Yep. It's is he the right guy or was he just the guy, right? Is Tim Cook the right person for this? And it's well, now you all know Tim. You've trusted Tim. He's chosen this guy to succeed him, and he's saying, "I'm gonna uphold the values of the greatest business leader of all time." Exactly.
And Tim is John is. I mean, Tim also importantly does say John is great, and he's gonna with some great detail about John Ternus, very similar to in his other public statements. But that's what they're trying to do here is just make everybody feel okay about it, it's gonna be fine. Everybody,
be happy, everybody. We're all good. There was something interesting though to me. Yeah,
there were some surprises in the call. There were surprises that I find that interesting because sometimes sometimes the charts are interesting and the call is boring. The charts are not that interesting this time. The call was interesting.
So CFO Kevin Parrick said, "As we move ahead, we are no longer providing net cash neutral as a formal target, and we will independently evaluate cash and debt." Now, to translate this, previously, Apple had pledged to have less of a cash reserve because they were just sitting on a mountain of money.
In 2018, Luca Maestri, the CFO at the time, announced that Apple's policy was to become net cash neutral over time. So essentially, the more money, what they had done is they had built up a cash hoard of, I think, $163 billion at its highest point of just cash. Net cash. So they actually had $200 billion and then $40 billion debt. So the net cash was $163 billion. They had lots and lots and lots of cash. And I think you could look at the narrative and say that in some ways Apple's culture was to bank the cash because Apple had been on the brink of bankruptcy and they never wanted to be that way again. And they decided, and I think part of it too was, how do we make Wall Street happy with us? How do we make Wall Street happy when we know that the iPhone is going to hit some pockets of turbulence? Services narrative was part of that. This was part of it. Because what they reinstated the dividend, and then with this policy, they said, we're going to be net cash neutral. So if we've got $100 billion in cash coming in, and we spend $80 billion, and we have $20 billion left over. What they're basically saying is what we're going to do is use that $20 billion to buy back stock, which raises the price so basically if you remain a shareholder, your price goes up, or dividends, which is they literally send you money for each share of Apple stock you have. You just get a money from the company. It's like you got a share, you get 50 cents from us for free. So you got 100 shares, you get 50 cents times 100, you get $50.
I imagine that this like the net cash neutral idea it wasn't it was post anything they were assuming they might want to use money for, right? Like if they were going to make an acquisition, they have to have cash around to do that. But,
right. Well, not necessarily. There's
I know
there's other ways, but yes, I think net cash neutral over time did a lot of work there. It was over time, and they always they were starting from a position where they had an enormous amount of cash. I think they still have like $50 billion or something. I don't know how much cash they have now, but they still have an enormous amount of cash. It's just not what it was when it was $163 billion. And yeah, the idea was that they wanted enough to do work, but they also didn't want to have this huge cash hoard laying around. And what Kevin Parrick announced last week is they're not going to do that because they want more flexibility. So they said they'll independently evaluate cash and debt. So I think this could mean a lot of things. It could be as simple as we found the net cash neutral policy to be a little too inflexible for us, and we'd like a little more breathing room to take a little money here and there, take a little debt out here and there, and having this stated policy ties our hands a little bit. And what is it good for? You could even argue, what is it good for? We've shown that we are going to do stock buybacks and we are going to do dividends. We will continue to do so. We don't need to promise that we'll be net cash neutral. It's just a thing that complicates matters. And they pointed out the board has already approved $100 billion in stock buybacks in the future, and that's an amount they haven't even gotten through the last board approval of stock buyback money. So they are approved to spend a lot of money buying back stock and raising the stock price as they go. So that's all true. I do wonder if the real motivator here is they would like to have more cash on hand because they are now in an era where they may need to spend more money than they usually have.
Yeah.
And that cash hoard might actually be very good in terms of strategy to buy other companies, and not even buy other companies, buy or invest in other companies, right? You see some of that now where there are these high valuation AI companies, especially, where you could have a strategic partnership or investment where, you're not buying the whole company, you're buying 30% of it or whatever. And then there's a special deal and all of that. Like, it gives them flexibility to do all that. Or if there's like a bubble pops and there's an AI company that's in trouble that Apple says, like, we've got a lot of cash, we can help you out. And then they get advantageous access to that company. They could also do huge capital. They may realize they need to build out more data centers or whatever, and they would have the cash to do that. I had the idea, and this is just, I made this up, but I'm saying, if they're worried about things like the RAM shortage or their limit on nodes at TSMC, one of the solutions is you go to one of your providers and you give them a giant bag of money. And you literally say, it's a shame that you don't have another factory making cutting edge nodes. Here's $8 billion. Go build the factory for yourself. And then we want the output of that factory for the first 5 years or whatever it is. Yeah. I don't know what the details are, but that idea. Or RAM. You go to the RAM manufacturers and they're like, we're just making too much RAM here for AI. We can't, it's very expensive. And you could, and again, it's very expensive to do this. You could hand them a bag of billions of dollars and say, build us a factory where you will make RAM for us, and we will pay this rate over the course of this many years. And the calculation you make there is, we're going to, by putting the money in up front, you're guaranteeing yourself a price over time that will actually be a good deal for you in the end. That's the idea. There may be opportunity for stuff like that, where they can spend the money because they've got the cash, and some of their competitors might have a harder time with that. They can just say, let's make this happen. So I wonder if that's one part of what they're thinking too, is just like there are a bunch of things about Apple's business that right now there's a little more uncertainty than normal. And one of Apple's superpowers, if not its greatest superpower right now, is that it's a cash generation machine. It's all that revenue every single quarter and all that profit every single quarter. And that cash can be given back to the shareholders or put into dividends and given back to the shareholders directly. It could also be used to improve the business, which would also make the shareholders happy. So I think something's going on here, but I am also not an MBA.
No, something is obviously going on because they've made a change, right?
Sure. But I mean, it could be something minor, but yeah, it strikes me that what happened is they're like, what if we want to do this? And they're like, God, we've got our net cash neutral thing, and they're like, we should just drop it. And the way they messaged it, because remember, they're talking to the financial community. The way they've messaged it is, don't worry, we're dropping the net cash neutral target because we might want to manage those independently, but don't worry. We still care about you. We're still going to do some stock buybacks. We're still going to do dividends, but we're not going to focus on being cash neutral over time. And that is obviously was prompted by something.
Yeah. A lot of ink has been spilled over the last couple of months about the huge capital expenditure of Apple's competitors, and that Apple is in a position where they've not been doing that, and maybe they'll just benefit from not having done it. And I wonder now if it's funny where Apple's like, you know what, actually, we would also like to spend some of that money on stuff for the same reasons, but maybe now they're like, okay, we're at a point now where we may need to start doing some of these things, whatever they might be.
It's not as well, I mean, and it's not even start doing these things. Apple does these things now. Apple pays companies to build factories for them in China, and it pays TSMC, and it pays RAM suppliers, and it signs up for multi-year supply deals on memory to guarantee and other parts, right? It already uses its financial wherewithal. But what this suggests to me is maybe they want more cash. Maybe things are getting more expensive, or there's more tactical stuff out there. It could also be a simple...
They're aware of the moment that we're in that they may have desire for flexibility that they've otherwise handcuffed themselves from being able to do because of a pledge.
Because right now they may need more money than they've been banking on. That may be the case, and so this is where we are. Is I think they want that cash. It could also be that they're looking at. They had some conversation about what if we did a strategic investment or an acquisition, and they're like, right now we would have a problem with that because we're giving away too much of our cash, and that like it's literally not necessarily that they are going to make an acquisition even, but that they want to be in the position where if it happens, they don't get... Like, it would be a shame if you're Apple and you want to make a vitally important strategic decision and you can't do it because you spent that money on stock buybacks, right? Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, that's dumb. So I think that's what's going on here. But beyond that, who knows? I mean, also, Kevin Parrick knows.
I don't even think I really believe this, but I would say maybe that was a Tim and Luca thing. They really liked that. And maybe Parrick and Ternus don't. Who knows?
I think it was also a product of that era. I think that in the late teens they were really trying to reassure Wall Street. There was the iPhone revenue had kind of flattened, and there was a narrative that like the iPhone was over, which is silly in hindsight. But that was that idea of like, well, it's only incredibly profitable, but it's no longer going to be explosively a growth. And the iPhone growth has continued, revenue growth certainly, right? We don't know if the numbers have grown, but we know that the money has grown. And then services narrative was a part of that. But I think this was a part of it too. And so they're tweaking it a little. It's not a wholesale, right? They're not saying we're eliminating the dividend and we're not going to do any stock buybacks, but they are saying we're going to kind of unhook that from this goal of being cash neutral. That is not necessary anymore.
I want to read a quote from Tim Cook on memory shortages. Tim says, in the December quarter, we really had a minimal impact due to memory, and you can kind of see that in the gross margin results. We said it would be a bit more in the March quarter, and we did see higher memory costs in the March quarter, and they were partially offset by benefits from carry-in inventory that we had. For the June quarter and what's embedded in the guidance that Kevin went through earlier, we expect significantly higher memory costs. They are also partly offset by the benefit of carry-in inventory, and then, where we don't give color beyond June, I can tell you that beyond the June quarter, we believe memory costs will drive an increasing impact on our business, and we'll continue to evaluate this, and as we said before, we'll look at a range of options. So, this is a long way to say we're running out of the benefit that we had, of the memory that we already had. That's running low. And there are places where you're going to see things go a bit wonky. One of those, so we'll come back around to what I just spoke about in a minute. So on the call, Tim called out that the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio are seeing increased demand due to their AI usages. And then actually later that day, Apple stopped offering the 256 gigabyte storage for the Mini. So now the starting price for the Mac Mini is $799. So they've got rid of the base tier. So they're kind of pushing up the margin, I guess, on the Mac Mini by default. So, it's like Apple are now saying that essentially as we move forward through the year, something's going to change. And as you point out in your piece, really there's two things. Either they make less money, or they make you pay more money. Yeah.
And there are different ways for them to do it. One of the ways is they keep the starting price. They raise the price by eliminating low tiers, like they literally did later that day with the Mac Mini, right? They're not increasing the price of the second one up. They're just making it not, the first one is no longer available, and you got to start. They change the starting price. Sometimes they do that. Sometimes they find a way to keep the starting price around. And they raise, these are the levers they can pull. They can change the prices on the products, or they can keep some base prices around and change the upgrade prices to be more in order to get more money out of it to offset the cost. There are different ways that they can do it. And they can eat margin, but Apple hates to do that, right? Like you've seen their margins. Their margins are not enormous because they know that they can eat margin and give that money back to people. Like they're enormous because they like having big fat profit margins. So, but they're not immune from the RAM price thing, and they're going to get bitten by it. And they've done what we've seen. I feel like what we've seen is very Apple, which is that they built in cushion, but the cushion can't last forever.
No,
and that's what they're warning against. And then also, and maybe this is related to what we talked about their cash, but they also hate being buffeted around by markets like this. They like hedging. They like long-term contracts. They don't like getting surprised. So is the cash they want on hand for what I was saying earlier, which is, are there ways that we can spend money to guarantee us access to RAM and processors, because we don't like where we are right now in being at the whims of the constraints of the suppliers of our RAM and processors. We'll see, but Apple's not immune to what happens in the world. They can seem like it sometimes because they do a lot of planning to avoid that, but in the end, in this case, there's only so much they could do.
And maybe not similarly, but in regards to shortages, so Cook and Parrick spoke of supply constraints in the quarter.
Yeah.
But the issue was not RAM; it was actually Apple Silicon with TSMC saying it will persist. Essentially, they blame themselves. Apple saying that they did not correctly forecast demand for the iPhone and the Mac. Specifically talking about the MacBook Neo, Cook said, "We were very bullish on the product line before announcing it, but we undercalled the level of enthusiasm that would be with it."
Yeah, it is a side effect of the iPhone 17 doing so well because it's on an advanced node at TSMC, and they have to estimate what they need, right? They underestimated what they needed because the iPhone 17 was a hit. And again, I think Apple thinks highly of itself and plans for the upside. But if you're above the upside, you end up in a situation where there's no more capacity for them. TSMC's making them as fast as they can. And so, yeah, this was a great iPhone quarter, but they said they could have sold more. And that's interesting. And then on the Mac side, I think it's interesting they talk about the Neo, because we think about it and think about them using that binned chip. So I'm actually kind of wondering here what that demand forecast is referring to. Is that they can't make them fast enough? Is that they can't ship the bin process? Like, I don't know what's going on there. They're telling the story about undercalling the enthusiasm for the MacBook Neo, but I don't know what that means in terms of what was the constraint there on the MacBook Neo? Was it because we've been all kind of assuming that this chip is binned and it's just sitting somewhere. Is there some other part that they're supply constrained on? Because like, if those chips were already made by TSMC, there can't be a supply constraint on there. So I'm a little confused about what's going on with that.
Yeah. And I found this fascinating. So on the call, Cook said that Apple will be applying for a refund of the tariffs that they had to pay to the U.S. government, but they will take that money and invest it into U.S. manufacturing.
Yeah, this is the judo move.
Yeah.
And this was notable, by the way, because somebody asked something vaguely related. Yeah. And in the middle of the call, Kevin Parrick was like, now I'd like to throw it to Tim, who has a statement about tariffs. And it's like, that's weird. Yeah. Like, in the middle of his answer, he throws it to Tim, who says, I'm going to make a statement here about tariffs since you asked, which they didn't, but they were obviously waiting for an opportune moment to make this statement. And the statement was, we are following standard procedure on tariff refunds. Because it turns out that these tariffs were ruled illegal. If we get that money back, we're not doing anything mean, right? We're just following the standard procedure that the government tells us to follow. So don't get mad at us. And if we do get money back, we're not going to put it in our pocket. We're going to add it to our commitment of reinvesting it in the U.S. So if the U.S. government has to pay $1 billion to Apple for tariffs, Apple will add that billion to their commitments, their existing commitments to U.S. manufacturing. And that is your political statement of, don't worry, don't get mad, don't claim that Apple is trying to steal money from the American people. And it's just a really smart move, because it's Apple just saying, you can't be mad at us, and we're reinvesting it in America, which completely defangs the argument about, like, this profitable company is stealing money from the American people. It's like, no, we'll reinvest all of your tariff money in our initiatives in the
money
US.
They literally would have spent anyway, right?
Yes,
like, it's 100%. It's very clever. It's very clever.
Yep.
And then your line of the call, Cook says, net, I'm over the moon excited about India.
Yep.
So basically,
I'm going to miss that jargon. I'm going to miss Tim Cook jargon.
Well, they'll teach Chinese how to say it too.
Okay, good.
Basically, Apple's excited about the prospect of India becoming the next China from a buying perspective for them, as well as from a manufacturing perspective. Yeah,
one of the last questions, which was from Aaron Rakers from Wells Fargo, is about asking Tim to play the hits of being bullish on China and India. And so he did, right? He listed all the ways that they've been doing great in China, and pointing out, I think, importantly, that it's not just that the iPhone was top selling in urban China, but the Mac Mini was the top desktop in China, and the MacBook Air was the top laptop. So you got to, they're spreading that out. Yep. And then he said something he said before about India, which is it's the second largest smartphone market. It's the third largest PC market. And despite being there for a long time and doing pretty well, Apple's share in India is modest. It's very small. Apple is not very strong in India. So from Apple's perspective, they have an enormous amount of growth potential in India. And that's why he's net over the moon.
Net over the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like the cow jumped over the moon? It's like, Tim Cook ran away with the spoon. Net over the moon.
After he worked on his spreadsheet. He saw where it was net, and then from there, it placed his position above the moon.
Above the moon.
Yep.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. It's been a long day and hunger strikes. There might be something healthy in the fridge that you could be making, but you want a good meal, and most of all, you want it fast. Eating healthily isn't always a willpower problem, it's a setup problem, which is exactly what Factor helps with. With Factor, you can hit your nutrition goals this season without the planning, grocery runs, or cooking. Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that's weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or GLP-1 support. And for strength and workout recovery, you can check out Factor's Muscle Pro collection. Factor meals are fresh, never frozen. There are over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so there's always something new to look forward to. They're all ready in just 2 minutes. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything you love this spring. And that setup problem idea I know is important in the Snell household because, it's sometimes just about what people have access to. And I know that your family very much enjoys the Factor meals, Jason, for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren will take them to work with her because we both have this issue, right? Like, I have to make lunch here every day. She's got to commute and she's got to get lunch and to go outside and walk to the store and get something or have a leftover or whatever. It's just more complicated. And, when the Factor meals are here, she can just take that with her. And in a couple of minutes, she's got her lunch and she can continue to do whatever she else needs to do in her job. And then we also get them for my mom so she can supplement what she doesn't really like to cook anymore. And cooking for one is hard. And so we can get her some pre-made meals that are very easy for her to heat up and eat.
Head to factormeals.com/upgrade50off and use the code upgrade50off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscriptions only while supplies last until September 27th, 2026. See the website for more details. That is factormeals.com/upgrade50off and the code upgrade50off. Our thanks to Factor for their support of this show and Relay. Rumor Roundup time.
Yeehaw!
Mark Gurman is reporting on some new features that Apple is planning to add to the Photos app at WWDC this year. So we have three new editing tools, all right? One of them is called Extend. Now, Jason, it took me maybe 10 minutes today to try and write out a summary of this. So ignore my summary and wait. If it doesn't make any sense, wait until I get to my example. So to extend an image, this would essentially let you generate imagery around a photo to make it larger. So for example, if you have a photo that you would like to make a lock screen image, but if you're a family and the lock screen image is too close and they get covered up by the clock, you could extend it to make sure it would fit correctly. So I did this. So with Photoshop a little while ago, I had a picture of Adina and Sophia, but when I put it into the lock screen, the clock was over their face, and I wanted there to be kind of space above, so they would be kind of more towards the lower half of the lock screen. And so I used Photoshop and their generative fill, and it was they were standing in front of a tree, so it just created a fake tree, and then the clock goes over it, and it's brilliant. I was really happy with this. And I remember Stephen Hackett wrote a blog post about this years ago that I'll find and put in the show notes, asking Apple to do exactly this. Like, just because Apple has a thing that says extend, like you can extend the wallpaper, but it doesn't do a very good job. It like kind of blurs everything a lot, and it doesn't always work. So this is like I think a really clever way of letting you kind of frame an image exactly the way that you would want. I can't think of any other use case other than making a wallpaper, but I'm sure they'll try to show us something.
I mean, that's a nice the idea, and yeah, Photoshop does this, and it does a pretty good job to do this kind of like AI extension where it's looking at the contents at the edges and it's trying to extend. There are places in the system where the photo isn't the right shape, right? And so if you've got an engine that can look at the content at the edges and the content of the photo so that you can have a photo that is placed properly, even though it wasn't quite framed right, I think this is a fun feature. I've used this feature in Photoshop too, for the same reason, right? Like I've used it for a few custom thumbnails on Incomparable episodes where I wanted to use an image from a movie we were doing, and all the movies are widescreen and all the podcast art is square. And it's like, can I just... It's the people in the Soylent Green factory. Can I just make the factory a little taller so that I can put the logo above it? And, Photoshop was able to do that very easily. And it solved a problem for me of like the pipes that are going up go a little further up, and it allows me to have the art be the art that I want. And so it's like, it's little stuff. And in this case, it's Apple's UI saying, you want to use this photo, but you can't because it's not quite the right shape. It's frustrating. So this is smart.
Yep. There's also Enhance. This one's easy to understand. Apple Intelligence powered editing to improve lighting and image quality. And then Reframe. Now, I am just going to read from Mark Gurman here. Designed primarily for spatial photos, it allows users to shift perspective after the shot is taken. A photo of a car, for instance, could be adjusted from a front-facing view to emphasize the side.
Okay.
I guess maybe this is to give another life to spatial imagery. Like, if you have more data from both cameras, maybe you can do more bold things and still kind of get them somewhat based in reality.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's obviously this is some image math. I mean, there's amazing things you can do with imagery to calculate ways of moving things. So, okay.
Yeah, it's like, and then my assumption is this isn't like, oh, make your Vision Pro photos better. This is like, no, this is just a use for that feature that they didn't have before. Maybe they can encourage people to use this feature. Because it's in the camera app, they can do it, but we're not taking spatial photos for our Vision Pro, especially when, as we've mentioned on this show, they have an algorithm now that is so good to make any photo spatial, it's almost wasted to take a photo in spatial.
You don't need to take a photo
You don't need to do it. So this means they can keep that feature in the camera app and it has another reason. But again, it's like with all of these things, you have to pre-think that this is what you want from the image. Where if you're editing, like a reframing an image, it's because it wasn't right, but you had to have made that decision before you take the photo. So why not just go to the side of the car in this scenario and take it? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm interested to see how they can sell to me this idea of me using the spatial photos I don't currently take, you know, like for something later. We'll see about that one. Mark is also reporting that visual intelligence will be receiving some big upgrades at WWDC. Well, we'll be receiving some changes at WWDC this year too. It's likely to become branded as Siri mode and just live in the camera app now, rather than only being launched from Camera Control or the Control Center. You'll be able to choose the Siri mode from the selector at the bottom of the UI, which I hope that they make better if they're going to put more options in there. To be able to point your phone and ask questions. Basically, the way Mark describes it is it's like all the features that we currently have. So ask ChatGPT, what am I looking at? Do a reverse Google image search. And Apple will be adding some features like scanning nutrition labels, adding contact information. This mode will show an Apple Intelligence logo instead of the shutter button in the camera app.
Sure.
I just think that if you're going to do this, you're going to make it way better than the way it sounds here. Like, this doesn't sound compelling. I've never used visual intelligence because I don't know why I would do that. I can imagine. I imagine these features being useful on a product that is already out in the world, right? So, like on a pendant, on glasses. Like I can just ask the computer. But at the moment that I'm taking my phone out of my pocket, I'm searching for this thing in another way, like I've been doing for decades at this point. So, like the idea of it being persistent feels good to me. But like I don't know what I'm using this for.
I mean, I think there are probably use cases. The one I keep coming to is, what is that product, right? Like, can I take a picture of this and it will show me the Amazon page so I can go buy that product? That's valuable, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like if it can actually match. Like if you see somebody with a, it's like everybody was looking up like what shirts and pants John Ternus and Tim Cook were wearing. Like if you're like, what is that shirt? And you take a picture of it and it says, oh, you can buy this shirt here. That's cool. Like I can see some value in that. Nutrition labels is an interesting idea. The idea that you could log stuff that way. I think the problem is we all would need to change the way we think of how we use our phone and the camera to have it be a data gatherer and not just a photography thing. And that just requires a brain switch. I still have that for scanning QR codes where I'm like, oh, right. I got to do the QR code here, and I just don't think of it that way, but that's the way to do it. Unfortunately, they put a QR code reader in the Photos app that if it sees a QR code, it puts up a thing that says this is a QR code. You should just tap here, and it'll do its thing, and that's fine too. So I think the challenge in part is just recalibrating what we think our camera is for.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to, if they want to make this a thing, they kind of have to start getting it out there, right? Like this is the kind of the Apple way, right? Like if they're going to try and build products around this, they want people to try and get used to it, and they need to start developing it in some way, and they could just put it in the camera app. But man, putting something in the camera app, that is prime real estate. Like I just want it to be more flashy or interesting than the way it's being described here. Because to me, it just I can't see enough of what I want.
It doesn't seem exciting, does it?
No, not at all.
It doesn't see exciting. And in fact, I would say, what if, like that it's a mode I also find kind of fascinating. Like if I open my camera and I take it out and I'm looking at something, like the QR codes. Like maybe it's not practical because of the amount of ML effort required, but like, shouldn't it just tell me what it sees? Why do I go into an AI mode and then grab something and all that? Like, I'm not sure this is the use case that maybe is what would work the best, even if it's the use case that is doable today.
Yep.
So it's a real UI challenge, and I think that that's something that Apple should embrace. Is how do I make people want to use this feature? And it's got to be good, and it's got to be a reason for us to change our habits.
Yep. Yeah, it's like funny that you would put it in the camera app maybe to make it more visible when I have an actual hardware button on my phone that I just need to long press and it will open it, and I still don't do that anyway. So like I don't know if putting it in the camera app is then going to make me go like, oh, I should use this, because I haven't been. In this report, Mark added a line at the end saying, quote, the changes come ahead of the iPhone 18 Pro this fall, which will include some of the biggest camera hardware upgrades in the lineup's history. Wasn't any more data than this, but information, I should say, but there has been previous reporting of a bunch of different things, including variable aperture on the Pro line this year. I am curious to see what this will end up being and how much more painful it will make the camera system that will be on the folding phone, because it's not going to be as good as the Pro, and that's right. It's going to hurt. And then speaking of the folding phone, Felipe Esposito at Macworld is reporting that Apple has decided on the name iPhone Ultra for the upcoming model, and that this branding will also come to future Mac models, most likely the touchscreen laptop.
There'll be a MacBook Ultra above the MacBook Pro.
Yeah. While I understand it, and like I like the name, it's still to me like everything that we think we know about the folding phone, it just doesn't match with Ultra for me, because it isn't the best one.
Well, they'll have to
at one thing.
They'll have to redefine it as being it's the best, because it can become more.
Yeah.
And they're good at that.
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah.
They're good at that. We can question names, and then they redefine them, and everybody kind of accepts, because these tags don't mean anything in a way.
Yep.
Other than how Apple defines them. And so we'll figure it out. It's certainly a possibility. What strikes me about Ultra as a name is that you're using that name because you want to differentiate it from the Pro. So like iPhone Ultra, okay, fair enough. MacBook Ultra, though, I'm not sure what I think of that. In the short term, I can understand how you might want to actually have a line above the MacBook Pro. It might actually solve one of your problems of having those kind of like low-end MacBook Pros. But do you really want 4 lines of Mac laptops, MacBooks? Do you want Neo, Air, Pro, and Ultra? Is in the long run, do you want that? I understand that like if these touchscreen OLED laptops are coming out, that they're going to be expensive, and that maybe there even is a reluctance to replace the MacBook Pro at the current price slot because you can't really hit that price. But like, are you committing Apple to having 4 laptop spots going forward instead of just having the Ultra be just the high-end Pro, and then, you know, over time it creeps down the line? It seems... Are they planning something where the MacBook Pro looks more like the iPad Pro and Air, where there's a very expensive high-end model that is great but is expensive, and then there's a lower-end model that's actually still Pro and still pretty great and still does all those things. It's just not as cutting edge. And again, like, is that what you want that to be long-term? That's what gives me pause about iPhone or about MacBook Ultra, is okay, yeah, you take the M6 with the touchscreen and the OLED and you call that Ultra. What happens the next year? What is the MacBook Ultra and the MacBook Pro? Are they just separate at that point, and the OLED only goes in the high-end model ever, and the touchscreen is only in the high-end model ever? And what differentiates that Ultra from the Pro that you're selling? Or does the Pro get diluted to the point where, like, the Pro is more just those low-end models that aren't that interesting, and then you've diluted your MacBook Pro model, which is it's a pretty powerful product line that a lot of Pro users spend a lot of money on. So I'm skeptical about that. I'm not sure I buy that as a not saying about this report. It's like, that doesn't sound like a good move to me in a way that calling the phone Ultra, like, fine, whatever.
The only way I could imagine making it work is if you gave it what I think is not a great name of the MacBook Pro Ultra, and it's only for the time until they merge the lines, right? And so it's like you have it as this really expensive one with the touchscreen in it until all the MacBook Pros get touchscreens, and then you can kind of just let that one go away. But because you got to give, because I do believe, as we spoke about on the show before, that is going to sit at a price point above the MacBook Pro. And so then it's like, what do you just call that the MacBook Pro with touch? I mean, you could. Is that what they do? Because you probably want to give it a name at least.
Yeah. I don't know.
We'll see.
It's a challenge. My issue is more like, what happens in a year?
Like, is the plan that you're going to make MacBook Neo, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, MacBook Ultra? If that's not your plan into the long term, then don't do this. Yes,
exactly. Because you risk doing harm to MacBook Pro when if it's just going to be for a year or two, just sell both versions and deal with it.
Yep. This episode is brought to you by Steam Clock. A lot of mobile apps are mediocre. They're not broken, they're just okay. But you notice the difference the moment you use something good. Steam Clock software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They are a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they have been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but do not have an in-house team to build something great. Steam Clock works with companies to level up their apps so they can go from "it's holding us back" to "it's pulling its weight." Some of their clients discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way to the App Store is not a good product strategy. What makes Steam Clock worth calling isn't just that they execute well, it's that they'll help you figure out the right approach and give you an honest read on your situation before you commit to anything. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they've helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares just as much as you do, Steam Clock is where you start. Visit steamclock.com/upgrade to get in touch. That is steamclock.com/upgrade. Our thanks to Steam Clock for their support of this show and all of Relay. It's time for some Ask Upgrade questions. Logan wrote in and said, just for fun, imagine if John Ternus came to you wanting your suggestion on acquiring a company that will make a splash for him as the new CEO. What company would you suggest? It doesn't have to be massive, in keeping with Apple's long-standing tradition of acquiring smaller companies from time to time. Personally, Logan says, I would suggest Procreate for the Creator Studio Suite. I like that suggestion from Logan. I am convinced Apple has tried to buy Procreate and it has not worked for them because they bought Pixelmator, right? Procreate is, I think, the most popular iPad app, and people love that app, and Apple loves them. They feature them frequently. I would feel it'd be fascinating if they hadn't at least asked. But yeah, that would be a good one. I'll go first. Sonos would be who I would say. I think Sonos are also, they're a company that not necessarily what they once was, so they might be a bit more purchasable than before. I bet Sonos have a bunch of patents for their technology, and also their equipment looks good, sounds good, works incredibly well together. That you would be benefiting from all of their knowledge on soundbars and getting their soundbars to speak to other speaker products. They're a company that make really good stuff, absolutely in Apple's wheelhouse. So they would just benefit from all of the good work that they've done.
So it's hard to know what companies, like, there are products and then there's like do you want the whole company and all of that. I think Sonos is a good choice. I think if you're talking to John Ternus about his desire for Apple to play more in the home, I think Sonos would be a good choice, especially if you can get them on the cheap, because they've had a bunch of trouble. Because I think that line of products would make perfect sense as either as Apple products or literally as Sonos products, like the Beat stuff that is run by Apple and that they're also building HomePods on the side as well. Either way, I think having Apple be more in that market is a good idea. That it feels like a fit to me, honestly. And if we want to, see Apple do more in the home, one way you can do it is through purchases. So I don't know. The problem is who owns what, right? Like in the smart home market, are there other purchases that they could do? Like Akara is interesting, but they're like a privately held Chinese company. So I think I don't think they're for sale, right? Even though they do some interesting stuff and maybe there is something there. Ecobee, similarly, again, it's just a niche product of the smart thermostat, but it would add another piece to Apple's home strategy if they're trying to build it up. Ecobee is owned by, this is amazing, Generac, makers of gas generators and other products.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Generac Holdings, I guess, owns Ecobee. They bought $770 million. So I was like, that's nothing. So I would look at smart home companies and say maybe that's just a company we could acquire and add it to the portfolio that John Ternus is maybe trying to build. So I think that would be a possibility. I like the creator studio idea. I would imagine, like, did they sniff around Affinity before it got bought by Canva?
No.
Because that would have been maybe a nice product to have that would have allowed them more of a direct competition with Adobe than what they've got. Because those apps are very much duplicates of what Adobe offers, basically.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, beyond that, you should never acquire
the Formula One group.
Sure, yeah, it's just buy it. Yep. I would say never buy a company to make a splash. But if there's value out there that helps you get, which is why I focus on home, is they've struggled and haven't really had much of a home strategy. Could you make some tactical purchases that give you a home strategy, or at least help lift your home strategy? The challenge with some of these, like we could talk about like home networking, but the challenge there is that those companies already got snapped up.
Yeah, all the good ones have been bought already.
Right, because like Eero is an example, but they're just owned by Amazon now.
Yep.
So that's not going to work.
Or Ring or something, right? Like if you wanted security cameras.
Owned by Amazon, exactly. Exactly right. So that it's already been picked over, so there's not a lot left. And Generac just rolled in and took that Ecobee out.
Everyone's talking about that all the time. We all
Generac. Well, who could stop them?
You can't stop those guys. You
can't stop the Generac. Well, that's the point, really, is that if the power goes out, they just keep going. They can't stop the Generac. You wouldn't want to. I don't know. I would say right now, I'd be interested in making some tactical investments, not necessarily even out and out purchases in AI companies. In fact, I would be doing that on the sly. I would be like, you're an interesting AI startup, I will give you money. You're an interesting AI startup, I will give you money, and an option to buy more or whatever. But like, you don't want to scare them off. Honestly, Apple's reputation in that space is so bad now. You wouldn't want to say we're going to buy you and put you inside Apple. It's more like we're just going to give you money, do your own thing, do great stuff. And if it comes down to it that we want your stuff at Apple, we'll make you all rich beyond your wildest dreams and we'll buy you. I would do a lot of that kind of like seed money get started, have access to smart people who are building next gen AI stuff. I think I might do that.
Ed writes in and says, if I remember correctly, when Tim Cook took the helm as CEO, the product roadmap seemed to have been set for several years. It seems like it was maybe around the third year before we really see Cook's influence on the company with products like the Apple Watch. How long do you expect Ternus to be at the helm before you see his influence as CEO? Will it be a certain new or modified product, axing a product or product line, maybe some new HR or corporate policy like Cook with the charity matching, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it'll be immediate and take forever. Yeah. Is the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there will be things that change the first month he's there, and some of those may be visible. And there are things that there'll be years of debate about whether that's really a Tim Cook thing or a John Ternus thing.
Mm-hmm.
It will be funny because there'll be new hardware, and people will say, well, is that a Tim Cook thing or a John Ternus thing? And it's like, well, before John Ternus was CEO, he was the guy in charge of the hardware development group. So it's a John Ternus thing either way. But and that stuff's impossible to pick apart is the problem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, I think Apple's going to start painting the picture of Ternus in charge from September this year, right? Like, I think he's going to play a significant role in the introduction of the folding iPhone. And they're going to be like, look, he was the product guy in charge of this before, and here he is now, and he's giving it to you, and it's going to be amazing. And this is like the difference between Ternus and Cook is it's, I think, going to be harder to discern where his influence begins, because he's already been influencing the things that we see anyway, which is the products.
Exactly.
And, maybe like in a few years' time, there will be stuff that he has driven through that otherwise he was getting blocked on or would have got blocked on, but we're not going to know. And I think it's going to be quite different to Cook. I don't think we're going to have this and I don't think there's going to be all those questions of when's Ternus's revolutionary product going to appear? Which
right,
because
it's a different Apple now.
Cook. Yeah,
because he's not Steve Jobs and he's not following Steve Jobs. Yeah,
and they haven't had a revolutionary product.
Yeah.
So
also a lot of this. I mean, sorry to Ed. I'm not trying to pick on Ed here, but I'll say, a lot of this is nonsense. Right? Apple's a giant company, and ascribing anything to the CEO is kind of wrong. I would say the closest you could come is approving a project that happens, or approving that a product ships, or killing a product so it doesn't happen, or whatever. Those big decisions, like Tim Cook is responsible for Project Titan and for killing Project Titan, right? Like, we can talk about that idea, but is it fair? Like, the CEO is steering the ship, but it's a big ship. There's lots of people. There's the vagaries of what's happening in the outside world, what they're capable of doing on the inside. So it's very difficult to get a read on this. So I think there'll be policy changes, and I think there'll be a few big things where we'll say that sounds like it was, or there'll be reporting as this was always his baby, this home strategy, whether it works or not, this was always his baby. That stuff will come out, but most of it is just, it's too fuzzy. It's just, it's not. Don't over-ascribe to the CEO what happens.
But we will anyway. Sam wrote in and said, a lot of the coverage of Tim Cook announcing John Ternus as his replacement, especially from people who've taken particular issue with some of Tim Cook's decisions, is understandably optimistic about what the change of leadership might mean. But do we actually know enough about John Ternus to think that he's not going to be maybe even more money-focused than Tim, or make even more decisions that developers and those passionate about Apple will take issue with?
Well, there's a lot of wish casting going on. There's no doubt about it. What I would say is John Ternus knows how products are made. John Ternus has had to sweat the details. Not all the details, but details, because he's been working on hardware for a very long time. Not just the last 5 years either, a very long time. And so he knows about the act of building hardware products at Apple. That's super valuable. And I think it gives him a perspective that will serve Apple well on a hardware side. But as for the rest of it, I don't think the argument is John's gonna be more focused on money than Tim or something, or treat developers worse than Tim and all that. I would say what I would flag is the danger is that if John Ternus is less interested in the money, than Tim Cook is, that he will delegate it to the money people, and that the money people, Kevin Parrick and the rest, may make decisions that we don't like. And part of his job, and this is going to be, I would say, the most difficult part of his job, is if your money expert, your CFO, says, yeah, we need to do this thing, John, because it's a lot of money, and this makes us more money, and you're saying to do this thing. The other option here, it's not even you're saying, the other option here is to do a thing that makes us less money. So we should always say yes to more money. And the job of the CEO is to think of the big picture and say, this is not wise. This more money actually hurts Apple overall. It hurts our brand. It hurts our long-term success. And he needs to be, I mean, first off, I don't know that the money people at Apple actually work that way. At that high a level, hopefully you are thinking big picture too, but it's the CEO's job to think big picture. So that's going to be a challenge. But I would say that's the greater danger, is not that he's coming in and saying, let's screw those developers, whatever. I think it's far more likely that he's focused on this stuff and he delegates that to people. And it's who do you delegate to and what do they think and what do you allow them to do? And do you as the CEO have the ability to come in and say, actually, the way you're looking at this is not how I want you to look at it, because under me as CEO, I want to look at this a little bit. I want to look at App Store revenue a little bit differently. I want to look at whatever it is. I want to look at it a little bit differently. And that's his job as agenda setter to do that. And the danger is that stuff gets out of control. And what's the classic, I think it's a Steve Jobs line of like, Microsoft let the salespeople be in charge. Like, don't let people who don't care about Apple, but only care about their little slice of it, make decisions that define Apple. And that comes to the CEO. The CEO has to be the one to decide that.
Yep. If you would like to send in a question for us to answer on a future episode of the show, please go to upgradefeedback.com and you can send your question in there, along with any follow-up you might have for the show. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to our members who support us with Upgrade Plus. You can go to getupgradeplus.com and you can get longer ad-free versions of the show each and every week. I'd like to thank our sponsors one last time. That is Steam Clock, Factor, Squarespace, and Delete Me. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, say goodbye, Jason Snell.
Goodbye, Mike Hurley.